but I'm just a rock chick.
I would describe my music and my sound as Avril.
It's the best damn thing.
Welcome back to another episode of the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast, a facts and trivia-based podcast about Canadian pop singer Avril Lavigne. I'm your host, Andrew DiFrancesco. So normally I begin these episodes by kind of giving an introduction about what the episode's going to be about, and then give a rundown of latest events that have been happening with Avril. But I thought for this episode, I was going to kind of switch that and do it a little bit differently, just because that felt like it would make more sense to do for this particular episode. So today's episode is going to be another bonus episode where we kind of just discuss the latest happenings with Avril. And it's kind of more like a catch-up episode, just because I haven't been able to do too many episodes this year, because as I've talked about in the previous episodes, I was very deep in wedding planning, and my wedding was coming up very soon. So I didn't get as much of a chance to really talk about too many things going on with Avril, and so I thought that this episode would be a really good chance, especially because as she has been starting the Greatest Hits tour, and she also did the collaboration with Nate Smith and all those things that we're going to get to, I figured that this episode would be a good chance for me to finally sit down now that my wedding has actually passed. So my wedding was a couple of weeks ago, and it was amazing. It was like the most perfect day I think we could have ever asked for. I spent a year and a half planning it, as I talked about many times on the podcast, where I was like, I'm not maybe going to do as many episodes just because I have like a lot of things going on with the wedding. And so all that planning and stress ended up being way worth it, because I think everything went off without a hitch. And it was a beautiful day. Our family and friends really enjoyed it. And of course, me and my husband really enjoyed it. And like, we just keep going back over the photos and the videos from that day and wanting to like relive every moment of it. So I'm happy that the wedding has finally passed now, and that it went great. And now I can maybe like get more into podcasting again. Like, the whole time that I was wedding planning, I was just like kind of really missing the podcast, because it just gave me like something else to kind of focus on. And it's a fun creative hobby for me. And of course, I love discussing Avril and, sharing my thoughts on the things that she's doing. As we were getting down to the wire with like the last minute planning and things like that, and like the wedding coming up very soon, I just kept thinking to myself like, oh, I can't wait to get back into podcasting, just because I love doing it so much. And like just getting to talk about Avril and what's going on with her, like I was just dying to be able to talk about like the latest things going on with her. So now that the wedding has passed, hopefully that means I will have more time to dedicate to doing episodes again. I don't know how many episodes I'll still be able to do this year, just because like I'm still going through like post-wedding stuff now. Like, we'll have thank you notes to send out, and I'm going through like a name change process and that kind of thing. And then we have our honeymoon coming up later this year. So like there's still busy things going on that will take up my time. So I don't know how many episodes I'll be able to do, but I definitely want to get back into the podcast game and keep you all updated on what's happening with Avril and keep talking about it, because I enjoy doing that. So going back to the wedding thing just for a second, as far as anything Avril related that we did with our wedding, we didn't end up picking any of her songs for our first dance, like some people probably would have expected me to do that. But I frankly just didn't think that any of her songs really fit for a first, like we definitely could have done like I'm With You or something as a first dance. And like a long time ago, I had actually thought about doing that. Like, I think I just always assumed that I was one day going to either use I'm With You or I Will Be as a first dance song, and those could definitely work. But when I was looking for songs for a first dance, I think it just like wasn't really hitting me for a first dance. We ended up choosing I Think I Fell in Love Today by Kelsey Ballerini, and just every time I heard that song, I would cry, because like the lyrics just fit us so well. And so yeah, I didn't end up picking any Avril songs for our first dance, but I did make sure that a few of her songs were included in our reception playlist. So I picked Complicated, Skater Boy, and I'm With You to be on the reception playlist. And I have to tell you, every time those songs came on, like, because I didn't know when they were going to be played, they were just played in random order, mixed in with a bunch of other songs. And so whenever those songs came on, I would like stop the middle of a conversation, or I would stop eating or whatever I was doing, and I would be like, I have to get up and dance to this song. And like I would go absolutely nuts when those songs came. Like I would know from the first note, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Complicated. Oh my gosh, it's the opening riff of Skater Boy. Like I would recognize the songs immediately, and I would just get so excited and like leap up from my chair and have to like rush to the dance floor. And my husband good-naturedly came with me, and because he knew like how important these songs are to me, and he would like dance along with me to the songs because he knew how much I love them. And so like I danced my heart out. I was like singing along to all the words, and I was like rocking out to these songs. And it was awesome to get to be able to incorporate her somewhere into our day, even if we didn't like pick her as a first dance song or anything like that, or like use her as like ceremony music or anything. We incorporated her somewhere into the day, and that was really special to me because I think I've talked about this before, but like I've loved Avril since I was a little girl, like since I was 9 years old. And she was always like a big kind of like role model for me growing up. And I just always loved her music and loved her. And so I think if I could have gone back to my 9-year-old self and been like, you're going to have her as part of your like wedding day, you know, I think she would be very, very excited. So yes, the wedding has finally come and gone. And hopefully that means that I will have more time to devote to getting back into the podcast now. And speaking of like the name change thing and how that relates to the podcast. So I am changing my name legally, but for the purposes of the podcast, I'm still going to be introducing myself as Andrea DiFrancesco. I think just because I've been doing the podcast under that name for 3 years at this point, and it's just like, I think it would just be weird to change it at this point. And then I'd also have to change it on like the podcast artwork and that kind of thing. And that's kind of a lot of work, like to have to change everything around. And I kind of have this thing about keeping like my personal life separate from like my, I guess you could say like a public persona as a podcaster, even though this isn't like a major level podcast or anything. But like sometimes I think just having that separation between like your public life and your personal life is a needed thing, like in this day and age of the internet. Like I'm kind of like wary about sharing too much personal stuff like online. And sometimes now we have to worry about things with like AI and deep fakes and that kind of thing. Like I think just the less information that you give sometimes online, the better. And so I like to share enough of myself that like people can feel like I'm a real person and that, you know, they can sort of know like some things about me, but I try to keep it mostly to like Avril related stuff. And I just prefer to like kind of have that boundary, I guess, of like not sharing too much stuff about myself. And also now that I'm married, like I don't really want to share too much about my husband as well, just because like maybe he's just not comfortable with that. You know, I'd rather just like, I think as far as a name change goes, like even though that's probably not a big deal to like just change my name, I feel like that just kind of separates, it causes a further separation between my public persona and my personal persona. And I would rather just kind of keep those things as separate as possible, if that makes sense. In other news about the podcast, I'm pleased to say that it is now also available on YouTube and YouTube Music, in addition to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible. Those are all the places where you can currently listen to this podcast. So I had said in the last episode that the podcast used to be available on Google Podcasts, and then Google went away and they recommended switching everything over to YouTube. And I thought I was going to have to like manually do all that, but it turns out, so I was saying, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to put this on YouTube. But it turns out that there was like a tool in Google that like they just automatically were able to transfer everything over to YouTube without me having to do any extra work. So I'm pleased to say that it is now available on YouTube and YouTube Music. It's not going to be like, it's not a video podcast in the sense that you like see me talking. Like what they were able to do is they were just able to take like the podcast artwork and put the audio with it. So it's just a static video. So if you like watching video podcasts, like it is available as a video, but you don't like really see, you just see the podcast artwork the whole time. So if you like watching video podcasts, it's not really like a proper video podcast, so to speak, but it is available on YouTube if you prefer to get your podcasts through YouTube. The next thing is about the Under My Skin anniversary. So I was able to get an episode up last month to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Under My Skin, and I had recorded it like a month before because I wanted to make sure that with the wedding and everything going on, I wanted to make sure that I was able to get it up in time. So I had recorded it a month in advance, not knowing what was actually going to happen by the time the Under My Skin anniversary came around. So I didn't know if she was going to do like an anniversary edition of the album like she did with Let Go. So of course that ended up not happening. Like there wasn't really anything that happened around the Under My Skin anniversary. They basically just released a few merch items and a couple of lyric videos. I'll get into this later, but I think the reason why there was no reissue of the album is because of this Greatest Hits compilation album. I think they just didn't want the two albums to like overlap each other. So that could be like, that's kind of my theory as to why there was no anniversary album for Under My Skin. And I know a lot of fans were really looking forward to the possibility of having an Under My Skin anniversary album, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. So if you are looking for any kind of Under My Skin anniversary content, you can go check out the previous episode of this podcast where I did kind of run through the best moments and performances and stuff of the Under My Skin era. And I also did post some extra videos and pictures from that era, like all the different outfits that she would wear back then and the most memorable moments and performances from that era. They're available on the podcast Instagram page at bestdamnAvrilPod if you missed them and would like to go check them out for some Under My Skin content. The next thing I was going to mention, as I kind of talked about briefly a few minutes ago, getting back into the podcast, like I'm happy to be back podcasting because I enjoy doing it. And like, honestly, I think after a while, like with planning a wedding, it kind of just gets so overwhelming that you kind of need like an escape. And I think that's what like that's kind of why I was missing it, I think, is I'm like, I need some kind of like creative outlet because I'm just like doing a lot of like planning and details and scheduling and that kind of thing. And it can get like overwhelming. And so I think just getting back into the podcast kind of gives me that creative outlet again and kind of gives me like another focus that feels just more like fun and not like, this is the biggest day of your life that you're planning. So what I was going to mention with that, how I kind of said before that, Avril has always played a big role in my life. And that's why it was special to have some of her songs be part of my wedding playlist. I will say as well that, like, just kind of on a more personal note, is that lately I've been feeling like Avril is kind of like a constant for me, like during this time of big change. Like when I was going through the wedding planning, like in the last few months of it, like I was kind of feeling like, a lot of big change was happening. Like I'm getting married and my name's going to change. And, it's like a part of you, kind of like part of your identity is changing. And so I think like I kind of kept going back to Avril and her music. And like, I really liked that the Greatest Hits tour was starting around this time as well, because it, kind of gave me something to look forward to with her and like new content to check out from her. I think during this time, like I kind of started to realize how much Avril meant to me in that sense, that like her music has always been there throughout the different phases of my life. And I think that that's a really common sentiment amongst a lot of her fans, because a lot of us have followed her since the very beginning, since we were very young. And we're now, most of us, into adulthood or even with kids of our own. And I think it's such a special thing that she's doing this Greatest Hits tour, because I know a lot of people have thoughts about like, why is she doing a Greatest Hits tour instead of doing new music? And, I'll definitely cover that. But just speaking about the Greatest Hits tour and the album that she's doing, I think it's really special that she's doing it now, and that it's sort of like a celebration for the longtime fans that have followed her from the very beginning up through now. I mean, she was herself a teenager when she started, and now she's going to be turning 40 this year, which is insane to think about. And like I said, I was 9 when I started listening to her, and I'm in my 30s now, and married, and like I've been seeing some things about people that are taking their own kids now to see her in concert and that kind of thing. And it's just like wild how much she's like spanning the generations. And so I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that she has kind of been with us. Like we've kind of grown with her and her music throughout like her whole career, the last 20 plus years. And so because like I've stuck with her for so long and she's kind of been present in every different phase of my life, like through all my schooling years and into adulthood and now through marriage, that she's like a comfort artist to me. I get a little bit like emotional kind of thinking about that, because I like most people who like Avril, it's like, oh, I love her music and, I love her as a person or whatever the thing is. But I think it becomes something else entirely when this person, like, it's not just that you like their music or you like what they do in their, career and you like them as a person, but that they're like a source of comfort for you, because like she was just something familiar to me that like in this time of such big change and where I felt like, my identity is kind of changing a little bit. I mean, in a good way, but, your identity does change when, you're becoming now from a single person to a married person. And even if you're changing your name and those kinds of things, like your identity is kind of changing. And so to kind of hold on to something familiar that you've liked since childhood, I think that was like a comfort thing for me. And so I kind of just wanted to bring that up. That's kind of a more personal thing, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think that so many people listening to this can probably relate to that. And I think I have heard other stories from people who, were going through things where they leaned on her music in that time that they were going through something. And that's kind of what it's all about. Like, that's why she does music. And that's why she's such a big artist and why she means so much to so many people, because we feel like her music gets us through like whatever we're going through. And for a lot of us, it's not just like she's an artist that we like. For a lot of us, she is like either like a friend or like just a comfort artist for us. So speaking of the Greatest Hits tour, like I said, I'm really happy and excited that the tour has now started. And at the time that I'm recording this, she's now doing the European part of the tour. And she'll be coming back in August, I believe, to do the second leg of the North American tour, which is the leg that I'll be going to. So like I said, I think the thing about the Greatest Hits tour, I know a lot of people are kind of, like, well, all the tours, for the last few years have been mostly Greatest Hits anyway, that we would prefer to see a new album and new music coming out. But I do have a theory as to why she's doing the Greatest Hits tour, but I'll get to that like a little bit later. Just speaking about the Greatest Hits tour itself, I'm not going to talk too much about it right now because like it's still in progress, but just my brief thoughts about what I've seen so far is, I think it's about what we expected it to be. Like she's playing all the singles like we expected. And I will say I think that like the staging is a lot better. Like, and I think that was their main priority, was updating the visual and the production aspects of it. And so I think that was an improvement upon the last tour. And she has like some different costumes and stuff that she's wearing to kind of keep it interesting and kind of just like elevate the production a little bit more. So it is kind of like more or less the same show as the last couple of tours, but like at least they did change a lot of the visual and production aspects of it and just kind of like elevated the whole thing to a different level than what she's done before. But I'm planning to do a proper episode on it once the tour concludes, which isn't until September, just because that's kind of how I prefer to do things, is like I prefer to wait until the tour has officially ended, and then I do like a facts and trivia episode about it, like all the different little tidbits and interesting bits of information about the tour, so that like once the tour is over, then I have all the information that I need. And I'm also planning to do an episode detailing my own experience of seeing it live. So like I said, I'm going to get to see her in August. And so I think I'm definitely going to come back and do an episode just dedicated all to my general experience of seeing it live in person. So like I had said about the Greatest Hits tour, like I think I understand like that people are like a little disappointed that it's not another album branded tour. But like I had said, I think this is a really special moment for her to be doing it. Like I think they're doing it because I think it's just the right time to do it, because I think that something is going on with the new album that maybe it's not ready yet. And so I think this is what they decided that they'll do in the meantime. And she's kind of having a resurgence in popularity as well. Like in 2022 with the release of Love Sucks, and then with the re-release of Let Go, and a lot of new artists kept talking about her impact that she had on them. And she kept being talked about like in the pop punk scene, like, she's always been the queen of pop punk, and talking about like her iconic fashion. And now with the Under My Skin anniversary happening, even if Avril herself didn't really do a lot to acknowledge it or celebrate it, a lot of rock publications and stuff have talked about it. And so she's kind of having like a moment of resurgence in the general public that I don't think she's really had in a long time. And like, she's getting a lot of recognition. Whereas like I think in the past, like a lot of music outlets never really seemed to take her very seriously, and she never really got too much acknowledgement from her peers and stuff. And so I think now somehow, like I think with Love Sucks and the re-release of Let Go, and collaborating with a bunch of artists like MGK and Olivia Rodrigo, and like all these different artists that she's been working with in some capacity, I think it's given her just like a resurgence in popularity. And like some of her music started blowing up on TikTok and those kinds of things. And especially a lot of younger artists are kind of acknowledging that she paved the way for them and that she's influenced them. And so I think that's inspired like a new generation to check her out. And like I said, a lot of fans that have been with her since they were kids, they now have their own kids that they're introducing her music to and taking them to the concerts and stuff. I think it's just like a really special moment for Avril. And I think if there was any time to do a Greatest Hits tour, I think she probably thought this is her moment to kind of do it while people are interested. And as we've seen, the tour has been selling really, really well. Like I'm really impressed that, because like the last couple of tours, like the Head Above Water tour, the Avril Lavigne tour, she was playing, at least in North America, she was playing a lot of small theaters. And most of the time they weren't even completely sold out. And yet this tour, she's playing like full-blown arenas, which she hasn't done an arena tour since the Best Damn Tour, the Black Star Tour, like that era. And she's selling a bunch of arenas out, which is like, I'm not sure that we ever thought she would reach that level of popularity again. And the general public is certainly seems to be interested, and she's appealing to a wide group of people right now, like not just the hardcore fans that have always supported her, but like the general public is interested to go see these shows. And so I think she was just going to strike while the iron is hot type of thing. Like, people are interested right now, so I'm going to do this. Like, this is pretty much the moment to do it. Like, she's not going to wait till people don't care anymore to do a Greatest Hits tour. I think this was pretty much at the time, as good a time as any to do a Greatest Hits tour to kind of celebrate her career thus far, while she's maybe figuring out where to go next musically, and while people are interested. And speaking of collaborating with new and up-and-coming artists, another thing I was going to talk about here was her collaboration with Nate Smith called Bulletproof, and when they performed together at the ACMs. So a couple months ago, we had seen paparazzi pictures of her hanging out with this country singer called Nate Smith, and people were speculating if they were working together either for her album or working on something for him. And like, people were speculating, is the 8th album going to be a country album now? But I had kind of thought that they must be collaborating on something for him. And So they ended up putting out a remix of his song called Bulletproof. So the song already existed on his EP, and they just decided to do a remix with Avril. As far as my thoughts on the song itself, I think the song is just okay. I've only listened to it a couple of times since it came out. She doesn't really get that much of a vocal part on it. She gets like maybe 4 lines of a verse, and then she's background vocals for the rest of it. So we don't really get to hear that much of her on it. And I think the song itself is just like, it's okay. It's I think a lot of people were comparing it to Nickelback when it came out. It's basically, it sounds like if Nickelback did a country song. It's just very like generic country rock to me. Frankly, just like nothing really all that special to me. But I will say that I think it's great that Avril did the song. I think it's great that she's collaborating with these kind of new up and coming artists, and that she's dipping her toes into something new and kind of unexpected. Like I think when she showed up to perform with him at the ACMs, like this major country music award show, I'm sure a lot of people did not expect her to be there, or like people might have even forgotten like, oh, Avril Lavigne is still like making music and stuff. And so I think it's just a really brilliant move that she's made lately to kind of immerse herself into the country world, because I mean, we the fans know that before she was ever even famous, that she started singing country music, but the general public, I don't think, knows that really about her. And I don't know if she does have plans to ever officially do country music, but if she does, I think that this is sort of her way of kind of introducing herself to that audience before actually doing it, because then it won't seem so like out of left field. You know, like Avril, like I think when people saw like Beyonce doing a country album, they were like, Beyonce doing a country album? Like where is this coming from? And so I think, you know, if Avril decides that she does want to do a country song or even a full country album, it won't seem so like out of left field and so unexpected, because she'll have kind of already immersed herself in that scene like many years prior. Like, you know, as we saw, she did the Shania Twain tribute, and then she performed with Miranda Lambert, and now she's doing the Nate Smith collaboration. And so just little by little, like these kind of like breadcrumbs of her getting into the country field, and you know, like not actually doing a full song. Like she's kind of just, you know, latching on to another artist or like one of their songs. So it's kind of like a low pressure way of her. Like it's not like as if she put out her own country song. It would be like very scrutinized, I think. Like it would be, you know, examined under a microscope very, very carefully. Like, you know, oh, this isn't like authentic country or like whatever. Like there would be a lot of criticism, I think, around it. And so this is a good kind of compromise for her to like get herself into the country world, but she's latching onto an existing artist or an established artist or an existing song, and kind of just putting her like kind of country twist or her country spin on it, as sort of like a little taster of the possibility of Avril Lavigne doing country. So even if I'm not like a super big fan of the song itself, like I think it's just okay. If it wasn't for her being on it, I probably wouldn't listen to it. I think that it's still like a good move that she did it, and that like the just the fact alone that Nate Smith wanted her on the song, like he's a fan of hers and he wanted her on the song, I think is like a testament to her legacy. And it shows that like new artists respect her and they like acknowledge and understand what she has done in the music industry, and that they just kind of like respect the path that she has paved for other artists. So as much as I think the song itself was just okay, I do think that the live performance ended up being a lot better, and that she kind of, like, I think her voice just sounded better in the live performance than the way that they edited it on the studio version. And I think she sounded phenomenal, honestly, on the live performance. Like, those low notes that she was doing were so rich. Like, we rarely get to hear her go that low in her register. And so, yeah, I just thought she did a great job with that performance at the ACMs. And I think that she seems to perform better when she's performing with somebody else. Like, I've just kind of noticed that over the years. I think that maybe as she's gotten older or something, like, I think she doesn't really like attending events or performing alone. Like, I think she always seems to have a lot more fun either attending red carpet events or performing on stage with artists that she considers friends of hers. And so I think that she and Nate seemed like their red carpet interviews are really entertaining. I would recommend going and checking them out on YouTube. Like, their red carpet interviews that they did together are really funny and fun. And their performance together, I think they had a pretty decent amount of chemistry together, and that they seemed to like really feed off of each other's energy. And she seemed like she gave a really good performance because of that. The next thing I was going to talk about is the fact that she recently appeared on the podcast Call Her Daddy. Call Her Daddy is a really, really popular podcast, and I'm really surprised that she ended up being on it, because I would have never expected her to appear on a show like that, because she doesn't like typically do podcasts and that kind of thing. I think that for longtime fans, the interview isn't terribly new. Like, it doesn't feature a lot of information that we don't already know. But I think it was it was definitely geared more towards like the general public that don't know as much of this kind of stuff about her as we do. But I think it was good that she was on a podcast like this to kind of reintroduce herself. I mean, it was obviously very strategic. Like, this was just before she was going to do the Greatest Hits tour. And so I think it was just a way of her being able to like introduce herself to a broader audience and kind of remind people that she exists. And so it wasn't really so much an interview for the hardcore fans. Like, they didn't really talk about much stuff that was unexpected. I do like that they addressed the Melissa theory in kind of more depth than she has in other interviews. Like, it has been addressed in some interviews, but she'll kind of gloss over it and just talk about it very briefly. But here they kind of talked about it a little bit more in depth. And I also wasn't expecting her to bring up Tyga at all. So the host did ask her if she actually dated Tyga, which Avril kind of like glossed over it. But at least like the fact that it was mentioned at all, I wasn't expecting. So there's like a couple little unexpected moments in it. So like if you haven't seen it, I think it's a pretty lengthy interview. It's like maybe an hour or so long. So if you haven't seen the interview and you have the time to check it out, I would still recommend checking it out. Like, I think it's still worth a listen or a watch. But if you don't have the time for it, I think you can honestly kind of skip it. Like, there's nothing really that new in it. But like I said, I'm still like really surprised, like pleasantly surprised that she went on a show like that, like a podcast as big as that one is, and that she did kind of get a little more deep into topics than she normally would. And I think that she herself seems to like going on podcasts now, like more so than doing like we know she doesn't like doing traditional interview style interviews. And I think the host made her feel comfortable, like they were friends kind of. And Avril just seemed like she kind of vibed more in that environment than like a traditional interview environment. So I hope that maybe she can come back on that podcast and maybe they'll like talk about some other things that they didn't get into, or that it will kind of entice her to want to do more informal podcast style interviews in the future. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is my thoughts on this Greatest Hits compilation album. So when the news first came out that we were getting a Greatest Hits album, I think most fans were kind of like, this is something that should have come out 10 years ago. Like, why now are we getting a Greatest Hits album? Like, do artists even really do Greatest Hits albums anymore? And if they do, there's usually at least like either a new song or like a rarity or a B-side from a previous album. There's like at least one new or new-ish kind of song on it, like to kind of make it worth buying, a collection of songs that you basically already have. And yet that did not happen for this album. It's just the standard like singles on the album. And there's even a few that are missing. Like, People Notice That Hot and Wish You Were Here were a couple of kind of big ones that were missing for some reason. So it just kind of seems like an incomplete collection, and there's nothing new on it, unfortunately. And I think people were wondering if maybe the tracks would at least be remastered, but there's been no announcement made about that. So I think the reason why the Greatest Hits album is coming out is basically just to promote the tour. Like, it's just kind of something to go with the tour and kind of help Avril with that resurgence in her popularity, maybe before she drops new music. Also, the rumor was that Avril had been wanting to release a Greatest Hits album for some time, and for whatever reason, the label just never did it. Like, I don't know if it's a rights thing, because she's been on so many different record labels that maybe it was like a big process to kind of get permission from the other labels to kind of put everything on one album. Like, I'm not really sure how all that works. So I don't know if that was like the reason why she didn't do this 10 years ago. But I think the fans would have really appreciated at least like a new song being on there. But again, maybe it was like a rights thing for some reason. Or maybe it was also an issue of physical room, because the album is being released on both CD and vinyl. And so obviously you can only physically fit so many songs on the album. Like, you have to make multiple discs if it ends up running over. And so maybe they just didn't want to have to like put out more discs than necessary. Like, they wanted to be able to keep it to one disc or one vinyl, two vinyls, whatever it is. They wanted to be able to keep it limited for space. At least the one thing about it is that it does include a message from Avril, which is nice. I think that's kind of a nice touch to have. And I guess like some newish photos as well. I think I'm glad that they didn't end up remastering the songs, because I wasn't a fan of how Let Go was remastered. And so I really wouldn't have wanted to see the tracks get touched. And I think also people were wondering if she was going to at least like re-record the songs, but I'm glad she didn't do that either, because I think that would just kind of, I don't know, defeat the purpose in a way. Like, we don't really want to hear the songs in a new way. We just want to hear the songs as we know them together in one album. I think this is definitely more of either a thing for the general public, as most Greatest Hits albums are, like for people who don't want to buy a full album from her, but they just want all the hits in one place. Although to people's point, they did say with streaming now, there's so many playlists on Apple, Spotify that have all of her hits in one place. So what's the point of having like a physical media compilation of her singles when we could just get them on streaming? So I think it's really more of a collector's item than anything. I don't think it's like I don't think they're thinking practically that people are going to actually like take this album and like put it on their CD player or something. I mean, certainly people are definitely vinyl listeners, so I think it's really more of a vinyl thing. And I also think it's just more of a collector's thing, I think, for people that really like collecting physical media, and like for the ultimate fan, the ultimate Avril fan that wants to have like every piece of physical media from her. I think that's really more what it's for. And like, I mean, considering that she's been an artist for over 20 years, the fact that she has never put out a greatest hits album, you know, that was kind of like a missed opportunity. Like, I think for years people were wondering, when is she going to do it? When is she going to do it? And so because she's now doing a greatest hits tour, I think this is kind of what prompted them to finally do that. And maybe, again, something with the rights, they were finally able to like clear up the issue with the rights thing or something. I also think this is why we didn't end up getting an Under My Skin anniversary edition, because then these two albums would have come out like very close together. I mean, they still could have done the two albums and I don't think fans would have complained. I don't think they would have necessarily been competing. But I have a feeling that's probably why we didn't get the Under My Skin album, because they just figured we'll do the greatest hits compilation album instead. Then the last thing I was going to talk about before I get into like a summary of all the events that have happened with Avril, the last thing I'm going to talk about is my thoughts on what's happening with the 8th album. Where is it? What's happening with it? So I think what happened is, I mean, she started working on this album in late 2022, and she hasn't really talked much about it lately. Like everything that she's been doing now, like any interviews or podcasts that she's been on, press releases, have all been surrounding the greatest hits tour and this greatest hits album, and like her performance of Bulletproof and that kind of thing. There's been not really a lot of mention made about the 8th album or new music. And so I think that's kind of indicative that something is delayed with it. I don't think it's a label issue thing. I think she still is with DTA, so I don't think that's the problem. I think it's a musical direction problem. So as we know, like she started working on the album in late 2022, and then some things in her personal life happened where like she ended her engagement with Matsun. Then she started dating Tyga, then they broke up, and now I think she's probably dating someone new. People think that she's dating someone new and possibly maybe even being engaged. I wasn't really going to talk too much about that because I don't like to speculate too much on things that Avril herself hasn't shared, but people have noticed that it looks like in some pictures she's wearing an engagement ring, and then in other pictures it's like been photoshopped out. So it looks like if she's in a new relationship or even maybe is engaged, that she's trying to keep it more private this time. So whatever's going on with her personal life, you know, she ended an engagement, started dating someone else, and then ended that relationship, entered a new relationship. So there's been a lot going on in her personal life that would certainly influence what she's writing her music about. And we also saw the direction, like the musical direction, change quite a few times where, you know, first she talked about doing an album kind of similar to Love Sucks. Then she talked about experimenting with like rap and hip hop, and the fans didn't really respond well to that. So then it seems like she went back to the drawing board. And I don't know if she's just been in sort of like musical limbo ever since then, where she is like kind of confused about what musical direction she wants to go in. And maybe that's why she's doing this greatest hits tour, because not only it's like a way for her to still be on the road and like keep touring and keep the fans interested and like kind of just like stall for time, I guess, while she figures out what to do with the album. But it also might just kind of help her have some musical inspiration, like, oh, the songs that I really enjoy performing the best, or the songs that go over live with the crowd the best, seem to be, you know, the ballads or the pop punk stuff or like the angry breakup songs, like whatever it is. Maybe somehow going back through her old catalog and like performing in front of an audience and seeing what they respond to, maybe that might just help her kind of come back to herself and figure out like what music resonates with her and resonates with the fans. Because I don't think like the rap and hip hop thing, I think that was so far away from what she's like known for doing. I don't think it would have come off as like authentic, and I don't think it would have resonated with the fans either. And so I'm glad she scrapped that idea. And I think doing like a Love Sucks 2.0, I think that would have only worked if she had dropped the album pretty soon after the initial release of Love Sucks. I think now people are kind of maybe not so into that sound. I think it just seems like a little like too little too late kind of to do an album so similar to the previous one, but you know, a couple years later already. I think the fans are just ready for some like musical evolution maybe from Avril, but not something that is like so unfamiliar that it seems like she's a different artist, like a completely different artist from what she's known for. I don't think there's going to be an album this year because there's not even a hint of a single, and she's on tour until September, and so that only leaves like a few months to put something out. I could see either like sort of a similar situation with Love Sucks where they put out a single in the fall and the album in like the early part of the next year, or I could see everything coming in 2025. Depending on when she can get the album done. Like we honestly don't know like the status of the album. Like we haven't seen any pictures of her in the studio lately. So we don't know if it's actually done or if she's going back to the drawing board at some point, or like honestly what's happening. I would honestly prefer that she takes her time to really make it what she wants it to be and not just like rushes something out that isn't good quality. Like even if she waits until 2025 to put out an album, that's still only 3 years since the last one, and I don't think that's honestly that long of a wait. Like I said, I'd rather she take her time on it and really make it like a good album, something like different than the last one and something that kind of shows musical growth than just like a rinse and repeat of the last album, or something that's totally uninspired, or something that's just like completely not like true to her musical identity. So that's pretty much a summary of all my thoughts on everything lately that's happened with Avril. So now I'm just going to formally go through it and kind of give a summary here of everything that's happened with her since the previous episode, and then I'm going to wrap things up. On April 30th, a new merch collection was released for the Greatest Hits Tour, including a Skater Boy-inspired t-shirt, hat, spiked bracelet, and necktie, as well as a t-shirt, skirt, and wristbands reminiscent of Avril's outfit from the Girlfriend music video. On May 10th, Avril announced a Greatest Hits compilation album to be released on June 21st. The album features all 4 singles from Let Go, Under My Skin, and Love Sucks, as well as Girlfriend, When You're Gone and Keep Holding On from The Best Damn Thing, What the Hell and Smile from Goodbye Lullaby, Rock and Roll and Here's to Never Growing Up from Avril Lavigne, and Head Above Water from Head Above Water. The Japanese edition also includes Hello Kitty from Avril Lavigne and the extended version of Alice from Goodbye Lullaby, plus a set of pins for each album. The set also includes never-before-seen photos, as well as a special message from Avril to the fans. Additionally, her first 5 albums were re-released on vinyl with different colored discs, as well as expanded editions to include tracks which were only previously available on streaming. On May 15th, Avril appeared on the podcast Call Her Daddy and discussed topics such as her childhood, early career, relationships, fame, and the Melissa conspiracy theory. She also revealed she would like to add her version of Breakaway by Kelly Clarkson and a Green Day cover to the Greatest Hits Tour setlist, however, this did not ultimately happen. On May 16th, Avril joined country singer Nate Smith on stage at the Academy of Country Music Awards in Frisco, Texas to sing a duet version of his song Bulletproof. The song was also released as a single on the same day. Avril began the Greatest Hits Tour on May 22nd at Rogers Arena in Vancouver, Canada. Avril's second album, Under My Skin, celebrated its 20th anniversary on May 25th. She uploaded a brief video to her Spotify page speaking on the album's anniversary and named My Happy Ending as her favorite track. Additionally, a set of anniversary merch items was released, including a hoodie, long-sleeve shirt, and t-shirt, and 2 new lyric videos for My Happy Ending and Nobody's Home were uploaded to her YouTube channel. On June 4th, an online auction began for a signed Fender guitar from Avril, with the proceeds going towards the skate park project. On June 7th, pre-orders were made available for an autographed numbered vinyl of the Greatest Hits collection available via Premier Collectibles. On June 14th, Avril began the European leg of the Greatest Hits Tour with a performance for the Rock for People Festival in Czech Republic. On June 17th, the full version of Rock Boyfriend, an outtake from Love Sucks, leaked. A demo version had previously leaked in August 2022 with only the chorus completed. The final version features the complete verses and a rockier instrumental. On June 21st, the Greatest Hits compilation was released. Additionally, a song called Exhale was registered on BMI under Sabrina Carpenter, with Avril listed as a performer, leading fans to speculate it may be a remix of the song coming soon. The song originally appeared on Sabrina's album Singular Act 2 in 2019, and fans believe it may have been a scrap track from Head Above Water, since the song was co-written by Johan Carlson and Ross Golan, who collaborated with Avril on that album. A new The Best Damn Thing themed t-shirt was released through the retailer Hot Topic, and a new purple and black sweatshirt and sweatpants set was released by Avril's website commemorating the Greatest Hits Tour. Billboard ranked My Happy Ending number 67 on its list of the 100 best songs of 2004. Loudwire ranked Avril number 21 on its list of the top 25 best-selling rock and metal artists of all time. She is the highest female position on the list, as well as the only female solo artist in the ranking. She is also the 5th highest-selling alternative solo artist of all time according to Chartmaster, selling 49 million albums. The music video for Wish You Were Here reached 500 million views on YouTube, her 4th music video to achieve this milestone. And Let Go reached 2 billion streams on Spotify, her first album to achieve this milestone. So that's a brief summary of all the things that have happened with Avril since our previous episode. As far as the next episode goes, I'm not really sure what my plans are going forward because I'm still trying to get kind of reorganized after all the wedding stuff. And like I said, there's still some post-wedding things I have to do as well. So just kind of trying to get my ideas together and figure out what I would like to do for the next episode. As always, whenever anything major happens with her, like if she puts out a new song or something like that, new collaboration, something like that, I will do a bonus episode to give my thoughts on it. But as far as like an actual next proper episode, which I also realized apparently the next episode is going to be my 40th like actual episode already. So that's absolutely crazy. I don't know if I'm going to do anything special for that. Like I might wait till the 50th episode to do something special. But the next episode is going to be the 40th episode already. So I maybe have to think of what would be a good topic for that episode. But in the meantime, I definitely plan to at least do an episode after I see her on the Greatest Hits tour and an episode once the tour officially concludes in September. I don't think I'm going to do an episode dedicated to the Greatest Hits album just because so I do facts and trivia on every album that she's put out. I don't think I'm going to do like a facts and trivia episode on the Greatest Hits album just because there's nothing really new on it. Obviously I don't at the time I'm recording this, the album is not out yet and I don't have it yet. So I can't even see what the booklet or anything looks like, or I can't read the message that she put in it. So I'll have to wait and see when the album actually comes out, if I think it's worth covering a whole episode on it, but most likely not. So in the meantime, we conclude this edition of the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you can get new episodes directly in your feed. And please take a minute to leave a rating or review to help more fans find the show. We're currently streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and Audible. And you can also find me on Instagram at Best Damn Avril Pod to keep up with the latest podcast news. Join me again next time on the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast. The Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Andrea DiFrancesco. Theme music is HD and Lights by J. Powell Flicks. Follow the latest podcast news on Instagram at bestdamnavrilpod or email bestdamnavrilpod@yahoo.com.